There is a quiet ache that all human beings know, though few are willing to name it. It is the ache of wanting something deeply, holding a hope, a dream, a person or a path so tightly that its absence begins to shape our inner world more than its presence ever could. We live in a universe where desire is woven into consciousness itself. To be human is to long, to reach, to stretch beyond the boundary of what is currently ours. And yet, perhaps the most painful question we confront is this: what do we do with the things that do not come, or do not come when we want them to? Every era has found a way to articulate this dilemma. Today, people say, if it is meant to be yours, it will come. In earlier ages, the language was different, but the challenge was the same. When the heart longs for something that does not arrive, or arrives only partially, or seems to slip through the fingers like water, the mind grows restless. We begin to imagine that reality is conspiring against us, or that we must force outcomes by sheer will. Anxiety becomes the companion of desire, and fear becomes the shadow of longing. But what if the problem is not the longing itself, but the way we cling to it? What if the suffering arises not from desire, but from attachment? This is where the ancient wisdom of Maimonides enters the modern world with surprising precision. For although he lived centuries ago, he understood something timeless about the human mind. Our pain is rarely caused by the world as it is, but by the grip with which we demand that it bend to our expectations. Modern culture tends to feed the illusion that desire is sovereign. We are told that if we want something enough, it must eventually be ours. But life does not operate according to our emotional insistence. Maimonides saw that the world is governed by principles far deeper and more ordered than human wishes. Through reason, discipline, and spiritual refinement, he believed that we can align ourselves with reality rather than fight against it, and it is precisely in that alignment that true freedom lives. The idea that what is meant for you will come is often misunderstood as a passive surrender. But Maimonides would never advocate passivity. He believed in effort, responsibility, and thoughtful action grounded in wisdom. Yet he also understood that human flourishing depends on releasing the illusion of control over what lies beyond our sphere of influence. According to him, detachment is not a denial of desire, nor is it a rejection of aspiration. It is a form of clarity. It is the inner knowing that the value of your life is not determined by whether every longing is fulfilled, but by the depth of your understanding, the integrity of your actions, and the refinement of your soul. To explore detachment through the lens of Maimonides, we must first understand the inner conflict that makes detachment so difficult. The human heart wants to believe that it can secure outcomes, that it can bind the uncertain to the certain. But the universe is not constructed that way. Much of reality operates according to a logic beyond our perception, a web of causes and conditions that the human mind cannot fully grasp. When we demand that life give us something simply because we desire it, we place ourselves at war with this hidden order. This war produces turmoil. We begin to live in the tension between what is real and what is imagined. We chase after things that are not ready to be ours, or perhaps never were. We cling to relationships out of fear, even when they drain the spirit. We grip opportunities that have already passed. We stay tangled in expectations that no longer serve us, perhaps never did. And slowly, the desire becomes a burden rather than a source of inspiration. Maimonides teaches us that the root of this suffering is misplaced attachment. Not love, not aspiration, not hope, but attachment. The belief that something outside ourselves must come to us in order for our life to be complete. This belief weakens the soul, distorts perception, and leads us away from the path of inner equilibrium that Maimonides considered essential for the pursuit of truth. Detachment for Maimonides is not coldness, it is not indifference, it is freedom from dependence on the uncontrollable. It is a state of equanimity in which the mind recognizes that its dignity does not rest on the acquisition of external objects or the fulfillment of personal desires. It is a way of walking through the world with open hands instead of clenched fists. When we internalize this posture, we begin to see our desires differently. We act with purpose, but we release the outcome. We pursue the good, but we do not demand that life unfold on our terms. We recognize that if something is truly aligned with our nature, our virtues, and our path, it will find its way into our life at the proper time, not because we forced it, but because it belongs there. This is the profound promise hidden within the phrase, "If it is meant to be yours, it will come." It does not invite passivity, but wisdom. It does not excuse inaction, but clarifies what action is worth taking. It does not diminish desire, but liberates it from fear. The longing becomes a guide rather than a chain. Yet to reach this state, we must confront the essential dilemma of human desire: how to hold aspirations without being held by them, how to love without losing ourselves, how to seek without being consumed, how to hope without being broken by disappointment. Maimonides offers a path forward, one that unites intellect, ethics, and spirituality. But before we explore his vision in detail, we must first recognize the power of the human dilemma itself. For it is only when we understand the depth of our inner struggle that we can appreciate the brilliance of the solution he offers. To understand how Maimonides illuminates the power of detachment, we must enter the architecture of his thought, a structure built on reason, ethics, and a deep awareness of the human soul. Maimonides never approached philosophy as an abstract pursuit. For him, the purpose of wisdom was to elevate life itself. Knowledge existed to refine character, purify perception, and align the human being with the divine order that shapes all existence. Detachment in this framework is not an escape from life, but a disciplined way of participating in it. In the Guide for the Perplexed, Maimonides argues that much of human suffering arises from mistaken ideas about what truly benefits us. We imagine that external things hold the key to happiness, but he insists that only inner perfection, clarity of mind, uprightness of character, and alignment with truth can lead to lasting peace. Everything else is subject to chance. Wealth, status, relationships, and opportunities all arise from countless causes beyond our control. To build our identity on them is to build on sand. This is where the concept of detachment begins to take shape. For Maimonides, detachment means recognizing the limits of external goods and anchoring our life in what is truly ours: our thoughts, our choices, our moral actions, and our pursuit of understanding. If something external comes to us, we use it wisely. If it does not, we remain whole. The human being who depends on what cannot be guaranteed is always vulnerable, always anxious. But the one who depends on what lies within his sphere of mastery cannot be shaken. In the Mishneh Torah, particularly in the sections devoted to character development, Maimonides emphasizes the importance of moderation in all things. Emotional balance, he teaches, is not an accessory to the spiritual life, but the very foundation of it. When desire becomes excessive, it distorts judgment and narrows perception. When aversion becomes extreme, it blinds us to possibility. True virtue lies in the equilibrium between longing and restraint. Detachment is the refinement of this equilibrium. It is the ability to desire without being enslaved by desire. He further argues that attachment is a form of idolatry. It elevates the object of desire to a position of ultimate importance, subtly implying that the fulfillment of that desire is the source of meaning and the standard of personal worth. Maimonides saw idolatry not only as the worship of physical idols, but as any thought that attributes power to something other than the Creator. When we believe that our happiness depends entirely on a specific outcome, we surrender our inner freedom to something finite and fragile. But Maimonides is not advocating asceticism. He never asks the human being to reject the world or abandon aspirations. On the contrary, he affirms the value of work, relationships, learning, and responsible engagement with society. His point is that these goods must be pursued with wisdom, not desperation. The proper path is to act with intention and effort while recognizing that the outcome is never fully ours to command. This distinction becomes sharper when we consider his understanding of divine providence. Maimonides teaches that the more a person refines the intellect and lives in alignment with truth, the more closely that person is connected to the divine order that guides reality. Providence, in his view, is not arbitrary intervention, but the natural consequence of living according to the principles embedded in creation. The more we detach ourselves from illusions and align with truth, the more harmoniously our life unfolds. Thus, when something is meant to come to us, meaning when it is aligned with our nature, our virtue, and the ordered flow of reality, it arrives without distortion or force. And when something does not come, our peace remains intact, because we do not hinge our identity upon its arrival. In the 8 chapters, Maimonides explains that human emotions are shaped not only by external events, but by the beliefs we attach to those events. If we believe that our worth depends on the fulfillment of a desire, we suffer twice, once from the absence of what we want, and again from the belief that its absence diminishes us. Detachment dissolves this second layer of suffering. It teaches us that the value of our life is measured not by what we accumulate, but by who we become. Consider how Maimonides analyzes the structure of desire. He distinguishes between natural desires, which arise from the needs of the body, and acquired desires, which arise from imagination and social influence. The former are limited and manageable. The latter are endless and often destructive. Detachment requires discerning which desires reflect our true nature and which are mere echoes of societal pressures or personal insecurities. If a desire arises from truth, it can be pursued without fear. If it arises from illusion, it should be gently released. This is the heart of the Maimonidean approach, to live guided by understanding, not by craving. Understanding brings patience, clarity, and proportion. Craving brings restlessness, distortion, and dissatisfaction. The difference between the two is not always visible at first, but it becomes starkly clear in the way each affects the soul. What then does Maimonides say about the things that are meant for us? He would answer that what is meant for us is what aligns with the laws of nature, the cultivation of virtue, and the pursuit of truth. When we live according to these principles, we create the conditions for good things to enter our life. But even then, we remain free from attachment because our identity is rooted in the eternal, not the transient. This perspective does not eliminate desire, nor does it diminish human passion. Instead, it purifies desire so that it becomes an instrument of growth rather than an instrument of suffering. Detachment frees the heart to love without fear, to hope without despair, to act without anxiety. It transforms the way we walk through the world, allowing us to engage deeply while remaining anchored in inner stability. In this light, the phrase, "If it is meant to be yours, it will come," becomes a reflection of cosmic order, not blind optimism. It acknowledges that the universe operates through wisdom, not chaos, through harmony, not accident. And it reminds us that our task is to align ourselves with that wisdom, not to bend it to our personal will. To understand detachment as a spiritual force in the teachings of Maimonides, we must look beyond the surface of desire and enter the deeper architecture of the soul. For Maimonides, the human being is not merely a physical creature navigating material circumstances. The human being is a bridge between the finite and the eternal, and the tension between these two dimensions, between what we want and what is ultimately real, is the crucible in which the soul is shaped. Detachment, in this framework, becomes more than a psychological tool. It becomes a spiritual discipline. It is the art of aligning the finite human heart with the infinite wisdom of creation. It is the act of stepping out of the storm of emotional turbulence and into the quiet space where truth can be heard. Maimonides teaches that the highest form of human existence is the intellectual love of God, a state of clarity in which the mind apprehends the order, beauty, and wisdom embedded in the universe. Detachment clears the inner space necessary for this perception. When the heart clings to something external, an outcome, a desire, a fear, it becomes entangled in illusions. Illusion is not simply falsehood. It is the narrowing of perception, the inability to see the whole because we are fixated on a fragment. Maimonides understood that truth is spacious, expansive, and balanced, while craving is constricted, urgent, and narrow. To cling is to shrink the world to the scale of our attachments. To detach is to expand the world to the scale of truth. This spiritual widening of perception is the beginning of wisdom. It allows the soul to recognize that what is meant to come will come because it flows from a harmony larger than our desires, and what does not come does not diminish the dignity of the one who seeks. For Maimonides, the universe is not random. It is governed by principles that reflect divine wisdom. To align with that wisdom is to find peace. But this alignment cannot occur while the heart is tethered to specific outcomes. The more we insist that reality give us what we desire, the less capable we are of seeing what reality is actually offering. Detachment is the loosening of that tether. It allows us to receive what comes without distortion and to release what leaves without collapse. This does not make life emotionless. Maimonides never taught the suppression of feeling. Instead, he taught the refinement of feeling. Just as a musician tunes an instrument to produce harmony, the soul must be tuned so that emotions support truth rather than obscure it. Detachment is tuning. It is the calibration of desire so that it becomes a tool for growth rather than a source of suffering. In this spiritual clarity, longing becomes a form of prayer rather than a form of demand. When we desire without attachment, our longing becomes a quiet expression of the soul's orientation toward the good, not a desperate attempt to bend the world to our will. Hope becomes expansive instead of brittle. Love becomes generous instead of dependent. Ambition becomes disciplined instead of frantic. Maimonides teaches that the human intellect is the gateway to the divine. This does not mean a dry, abstract logic. It means a mind capable of perceiving reality without distortion. Detachment removes the emotional fog that blinds perception. It allows the mind to ascend from the world of imagination to the world of understanding. When desire is purified, the intellect is freed. And when the intellect is freed, the soul rises into clarity. This ascent is not an escape from the world. It is a deeper participation in it. With detachment, we begin to see that the unfolding of life is not a threat to be controlled, but a revelation to be witnessed. What comes to us is not an accident, and what leaves us is not a punishment. The universe reveals itself in patterns that the detached mind can recognize. Imagine a person who has cultivated this clarity. They pursue goals with effort, but without desperation. They love people fully, but without fear of loss. They welcome opportunities, but do not collapse when doors close. Their inner life is spacious. They are anchored in what cannot be taken from them: understanding, virtue, and alignment with truth. Such a person becomes a vessel for divine wisdom, because their soul is no longer consumed by the noise of craving. Maimonides describes this state as the perfection of the soul. Not perfection in the sense of flawlessness, but in the sense of wholeness. A soul is whole when it is undistracted by illusions, when it stands firmly in the center of truth, when it is capable of loving reality rather than resisting it. Detachment is the path to this center. Through detachment, the human being participates in the divine order rather than trying to dominate it. This participation is quiet, humble, and profound. It is the recognition that the ultimate good is not the fulfillment of every desire, but the alignment of the soul with eternal wisdom. In this alignment, a subtle transformation occurs. We no longer ask, "Why has this not come to me?" Instead, we ask, "What can I learn from this moment, and how can I deepen my understanding?" The phrase, "If it is meant to be yours, it will come," becomes a spiritual truth, not a romantic reassurance. It reflects the insight that the universe is ordered, that the divine wisdom that shapes existence is not arbitrary, and that what aligns with the soul's growth will naturally enter its orbit. What does not align will not, and this is not loss, it is guidance. In this expanded spiritual state, detachment becomes love, not love for particular objects or outcomes, but love for the order, harmony, and wisdom of creation. This is the intellectual love of God described by Maimonides, a love rooted in understanding, nourished by clarity, and strengthened through detachment. When the soul reaches this point, it becomes peaceful even in uncertainty, not because the future is known, but because the soul trusts the structure of reality. It no longer clings to what must come, nor fears what must leave. It lives in alignment with truth, and in that alignment, it discovers the deepest kind of freedom. The teachings of Maimonides are never meant to remain suspended in the realm of theory. They are crafted to shape daily life, to refine action, to clarify emotion, and to direct the human being toward a path of balanced excellence. Detachment, as he conceives it, must be lived. It must be practiced in the interwoven fabric of ordinary experiences, those moments when desire tightens its grip, when fear clouds judgment, when disappointment arises, or when uncertainty stretches across the horizon. To apply Maimonidean detachment in modern life, we must begin with the sphere of inner mastery. Maimonides teaches that the human being has control over thoughts, intentions, and actions, but not over outcomes. This distinction becomes the foundation of practical detachment. Each day, ask yourself, what is within my power and what is not? The moment you make this distinction, clarity begins. Desire no longer overpowers judgment. Fear loses its ability to dominate your decisions. The mind becomes anchored. You can desire, but you do not have to depend. You can aspire, but you do not have to cling. You can act, but you do not have to insist. This inner anchoring creates the conditions for wise, thoughtful action. When you practice this consistently, you no longer move through life in reaction to outcomes that lie beyond your influence. You act because acting is noble, because effort is honorable, because virtue is its own reward. The next practical step is the cultivation of moderation. Maimonides places extraordinary emphasis on the middle path. Excessive desire distorts. Excessive avoidance impoverishes the spirit. Detachment lives in the center. To apply this, examine your emotional responses. When you want something intensely, ask yourself whether the intensity arises from truth or insecurity. If fear of loss drives your attachment, pause, breathe, return to the center. From that place, reevaluate what you truly seek. Moderation is not merely a moral concept, it is a psychological safeguard. It protects you from falling into despair when something slips away, and from arrogance when something arrives. The more balanced your inner world becomes, the less you cling to outcomes as markers of identity. Maimonides also emphasizes the discipline of thought. The mind naturally magnifies what it desires and fears. If left unchecked, this magnification creates illusions that inflate attachment and heighten suffering. To counter this, Maimonides instructs us to refine our intellect, to question assumptions, to examine motives, and to seek clarity. When you feel yourself becoming dependent on something external, a relationship, an opportunity, an achievement, pause and ask, what belief is fueling this dependence? Does this belief align with truth or with imagination? Through this discipline, the intensity of attachment dissolves, leaving behind a more purified longing. one that does not enslave the soul. Another essential practice is the cultivation of gratitude and contentment. Maimonides teaches that contentment is a form of wisdom, a sign that the mind recognizes the sufficiency of what it already possesses. Gratitude softens desire, not by diminishing ambition, but by placing aspiration within the larger context of appreciation. When you cultivate gratitude, what you already have becomes luminous. Desire becomes calmer, the heart becomes less frantic, and when desires do arise, they arise from abundance rather than scarcity. Practically, this means taking moments throughout the day to acknowledge what is already present in your life, the abilities you possess, the relationships that sustain you, the opportunities that have shaped you, the knowledge you've already gained. These recognitions create inner spaciousness. In that spaciousness, detachment naturally grows. Maimonides also teaches that wisdom requires engagement with the world, not withdrawal from it. Detachment is not a reason to avoid relationships, challenges, or aspirations. Instead, it is a way of engaging with them more truthfully. When approaching any desire, align your actions with virtue. Pursue what is noble, ethical, and constructive. When you act with integrity, you free yourself from the tyranny of outcomes. You know that your actions reflect the highest version of yourself, regardless of what returns to you from the world. This transforms how you navigate uncertainty. Most human suffering arises from resisting the unknown, from trying to secure what cannot be secured. But Maimonides teaches that the unknown is not the enemy. It is the natural landscape of human existence. Your task is not to eliminate uncertainty, but to meet it with clarity, discipline, and trust in the order embedded in creation. To practice this, allow your actions to arise from wisdom, not from fear. When you make decisions grounded in understanding, you remain steady even when results differ from what you imagined. You are not shaken when something does not come, because your actions were grounded in virtue, not in the illusion of control. The next practical dimension is emotional refinement. Detachment requires the cultivation of equanimity, the ability to remain steady without becoming numb. This means that when something you desire moves toward you, you welcome it with gratitude, but without the illusion that it completes you. When something moves away, you allow it to leave without collapsing inward. You feel the emotions, joy, sadness, hope, disappointment, but you do not become governed by them. To develop equanimity, practice observing your emotions before acting on them. Let them arise, let them speak, but do not follow impulsively. This inner space between emotion and action is where freedom begins. Over time, you discover that emotions no longer dictate your identity or your decisions. They become companions rather than commanders. Finally, Maimonides invites us to live with intellectual humility. This humility acknowledges that the story of our life is larger than our understanding. The path ahead contains possibilities we cannot see. When you believe that reality must unfold according to your predictions, you create unnecessary suffering. But when you cultivate humility, you allow reality to reveal itself. You trust the unfolding of events not because everything will be easy, but because everything will be meaningful. This humility is the culmination of detachment. It is the inner recognition that the universe is shaped by wisdom beyond our comprehension. You do your part, you act, you strive, you learn, you love, but you do not insist that life bend to your timeline. You trust that what is truly meant to be yours will come, not through force, but through alignment. In this state, you become free. You walk through the world with open hands. You engage fully but cling to nothing. You allow desire to inspire action, not to imprison the soul. You embrace the flow of life without demanding that it conform to your expectations. You discover that peace is not found in the fulfillment of every longing, but in the clarity that arises when those longings no longer define you. Through detachment, the wisdom of Maimonides becomes a living force within you. You act with integrity, You think with clarity, you feel with refinement, you trust with humility. And slowly, the truth becomes evident. What is meant to be yours will find its way to you, not because you grasped for it, but because you grew into the person capable of receiving it.